Assalamualaikum to my dearest students. My name is ALISA dan binti AMRAN and you can call me Miss ALISA. Today, we will look on the topic of circulatory system of human. Before we look into our circulatory system, let's look on our heart first. Our heart, that beating muscle, is probably the most iconic organ in our body. It powers the entire circulatory system, transporting nutrients, oxygen, waste, heat, hormones, and even immune cells throughout the body for over and over. But in the end, the heart does not make you love. It does not break apart if you get down by your boo. And it is not a lonely hunter. The truth is, the heart is really just a pump. A big, wet, muscly brute of a pump. And it doesn't care about poetry or even chocolate or why you are crying. Your heart basically moves your blood around more than 5 liters of it at about 60 beats per minute. That is about 100,000 beats a day, 35 million a year, 2 to 3 billion heartbeats in a lifetime. Structure of the heart. Let us begin with a little anatomy. The average adult human heart is about the size of 2 fists clasped together. One of the few bits of trivia you often hear about human anatomy that is actually true. The heart is hollow, cone-shaped, and only weighs about 250 to 350 grams. A pretty modest size of our body's greatest workhorse. The heart is nestled in a double-walled sac called the pericardium. The tough outer layer, or we call it as fibrous pericardium, is made of dense connective tissue and helps protect the heart while anchoring it to some of the surrounding structures so it doesn't bounce all over the place while beating. Meanwhile, the inner serous pericardium consists of an inner visceral layer or epicardium, which is actually part of the heart wall, and outer parietal layer. These two layers are separated by a thick film of fluid that acts like a natural lubricant, providing a slippery environment for the heart to move around so it doesn't create friction as it beats. The wall of the heart itself is made of yet more layers, 3 of them, that epicardium on the outside, the myocardium in the middle, which is mainly composed of cardiac muscle tissue that does all the work of contracting, and the innermost of endocardium, a thin white layer of squamous epithelial tissue. Now, let's look into the general system of chambers, valves, veins, and arteries all work together to circulate blood around our body. Of course, fluid like to move from areas of high pressure to areas of low pressure, and the heart creates those pressures. Form once again the following function. Our heart is divided laterally into 2 sides by a thin inner partition called the septum. The division creates 4 chambers, 2 superior atria, which are the low pressure areas, and 2 inferior ventricles that produce the high pressures. Each chamber has a corresponding valve. When a valve opens, blood flows in one direction into the next chamber. And when it closes, that's it. No blood can just flow back into the chamber. It just left. Next, into the composition of human blood. First, let's mention that blood is technically considered as connective tissue, and as such, it is the only fluid tissue in the body full of fibrous proteins. It is comprised of foam elements, which are blood cells suspended in a fluid called plasma. If we place blood in a centrifuge, it will separate into its component. The densest section is comprised of erythrocytes, or red blood cells, and the least dense section will be the yellowish plasma. They are separated by the buffy coat, a white layer containing platelets as well as leukocytes, otherwise known as white blood cells. As a whole, blood is responsible for distributing various substances around the body, most notably oxygen, which we cannot survive very long without it. But it also carries nutrients absorbed from the digestive tract and hormones secreted by the endocrine organs. Blood also delivers waste product to the organ that will dispose of them, like the carbon dioxide that we exhale. Beyond this, blood serves to regulate pH in various tissues, maintain body temperature, and also prevent any infection. Next, look at the leukocytes or white blood cells, which unlike the far more abundant red blood cells, are complete cells with nuclei and also organelles. These are part of the immune system, but for now we will just understand that this just help us defend against pathogen and other harmful things. They use the circulatory system to get around the body, but they can also slip out into other connective tissue to do their work. There are two types of white blood cells, which are granulocytes and agranulocytes, which differ in the presence or absence of the granules. The three types of granulocytes are neutrophils, which kill bacteria, eosinophils, which kill parasitic worms, and basophils, which contain histamine that attracts other white blood cells to a site of inflammation. Agranulocytes, on the other hand, can be lymphocytes, which fight viruses and tumors, and also give rise to plasma cells, which produce antibodies, or there can be monocytes, which become macrophages that can eat up the intruders. Leukocytes are produced by leukopoiesis, which is stimulated by certain chemical messenger. Lastly, we get to the platelets. Platelets are fragments of large cells called megakaryocytes. These fragments are essential during blood clotting, which happen when blood vessels are damaged, as platelets can plug up any holes or tears to seal the things off. They flow through the bloodstream in an inactive state unless needed, dying every 10 days or so and constantly regenerated. These platelets are important during hemostasis, which is the process by which the body will stop bleeding by it. This essentially means that where there is damage to a vessel, smooth muscle will contract. Platelets will plug the tear, and protein called fibrin will form a mesh to patch everything up. Once the vessel has healed, the clot is removed through a process called fibrinolysis, so that there is no blockage in the vessel. Lastly, looking on the human blood vessel, which are artery, vein, and blood capillaries. Functionally, those arteria are the receiving chambers for the blood coming back to the heart after circulating through the body. The ventricle, meanwhile, are the discharging chambers that push the blood back out of the heart. As a result, the atria are pretty thin wall because the blood flows back into the heart under low pressure, and all of those arteria have to do is just push it down into the relaxed ventricles, which does not take a whole lot of effort. The ventricles are beastly by comparison. They are the true pumps of the heart, and they need a big strong walls to shoot blood back out of the heart with every contraction. And the whole thing is connected to the rest of your circulatory system by way of arteries and veins.